Hello, everyone, and welcome to Underwater Wild, my Octopus Teacher's Extraordinary World, a conversation with Craig Foster and Living on Earth, presented in partnership with the Living on Earth Book Club, which features authors of recently published environmental books, and the UMass Boston School for the Environment. This event is made possible with generous support from the Lowell Institute, which allows the New England Aquarium to offer its lecture series free of charge. I'm Vicki Spruill, and I'm the proud president and CEO of the New England Aquarium. Our mission is to ensure a vital and vibrant ocean for generations to come. We safeguard endangered and threatened species and their habitats. We inspire people to take action, and we affect local, state, and federal policies that do the same. This event brings together two extraordinary ocean advocates. Steve Curwood is the creator, the host, and executive producer of Living on Earth, which has produced weekly shows on climate change and ecology for the last 30 years. Steve is an award-winning journalist who has worked in public radio since 1979. In addition to his work for National Public Radio and our local affiliate here in Boston, WBUR-FM, he's covered news for CBS News, the Boston Globe, and WGBH-TV Boston. Steve is also a dear friend and a trustee of the New England Aquarium. Joining Steve for our Living on Earth Book Club event is Craig Foster. Craig is one of the world's leading natural history filmmakers and co-founder of the nonprofit Sea Change Project. Craig's Academy Award-winning documentary film, My Octopus Teacher, follows the story of his daily free dives into the frigid waters of South Africa's False Bay and his extraordinary year-long encounter with a wild octopus. And I just have to say personally that this film literally changed my life, and I am so honored to be in the presence of you, Craig, and the marvelous work that you do. Through this regular, intensive immersion, he uncovered a plethora of new animal behaviors and species. They are all on brilliant display in Craig's new book, which is fantastic, with co-author Ross Frylinck, titled Underwater Wild, My Octopus Teacher's Extraordinary World. Craig joins us today from South Africa to share more about his experiences and the connections that bind us to each other and to our beloved ocean. It is my honor now to welcome tonight's host, Steve Curwood.
Well, thank you, Vicki. And did you like the book?
I have to unmute. I loved the book. I loved the book. I have to say that was my Thanksgiving weekend treat.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I mean, to win an Academy Award and then have a book that goes above and beyond. We really are so pleased. First of all, thank you, Vicki, because it's great to be partnering with you for this event. And by the way, I should thank the home of Living on Earth and the regular co-sponsor of our book club events, the School for the Environment at UMass Boston and the Sustainable Solutions Laboratory there. And welcome all of you back to the Living on Earth Book Club. It's December, so I guess this is the last one of the year. But we'll be getting going at the beginning of the year. You know, Vicki did point out that I'm the host and producer of and founder of the public radio program and podcast, Living on Earth. So Craig Foster is going to take us deep inside his exploration of the great African sea forest. And of course, Vicki mentioned that if you screen the Netflix movie, My Octopus Teacher, you may have already seen those pictures. But we're going to talk even more about the connections with this world. You know, it's almost as if Craig's book would be the documentation of some creature who had come from yet another planet to tell us what's there. because it's just so unusual what he's been able to document and move forward in this book. So I'm really excited that he's with us. But before we get started, I just need to let you know that we can't host these events without your support. And thanks to a generous offer from the publisher, Mariner Books, which is an imprint of HarperCollins, we will send the first 20 people who donate $75 or more to Living on Earth this week a copy of the book. And I got to tell you, that's a steal, because this massive volume goes for, I think, $50 retail in the store. And every cent of your $75 will support the work we do and help us keep bringing these kinds of events. So you can donate at loe.org. Just click on donate at the top of the page, and thank you. And by the way, this event is a little unusual. Ordinarily, we do these live, but because of the frequent power outages in South Africa, we thought that we would tape this conversation because that's where Craig is. He's just south of Simonstown there, along False Bay in Greater Cape Town. If you close your eyes and imagine the southern tip of South Africa, that's where he is, just not too far from Cape Point itself. So sadly, we can't take live questions tonight, but we do have some questions that were sent in ahead of time that we'll be able to bring into the conversation. So let's get started. Craig Foster, turn on your video and join us. Welcome to Living on Earth.
Wonderful to be here, Steve, and so nice to meet you and Vicky.
You know, the pictures in your book alone are worth it, right? But then the stories and observations are even more powerful. Just congratulations, Craig. Just congratulations to you and your team. You're a miracle worker here.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry for all the gushing, but this is all gush-worthy. So, in these challenging times, it's great to find something that's just so extraordinary. So, we are talking to you in December, which of course is the beginning of the summer. Things are starting to warm up there in the southern hemisphere, and the water must be getting warmer there now. Tell me, when's the last time you got into the ocean, and what did you see?
I go in every day, so I was in about 2 hours ago. It's extremely rough today. And I was with a great friend that I'm mentoring, so it was all about taking him and getting him used to the very rough water and dealing with extremely murky conditions. So that was a nice challenge for him. But this week has been quite a wonderful octopus week. At this time of year, a lot of the medium-sized octopus come out of the deep into the shallows, and we can see up to 20 animals in a dive. And I'm particularly fascinated with how they catch their prey. They catch over 50 different species, and each one of these species require tremendous ingenuity to catch. And I've been focusing on the kelp limpets. These are limpets that grow on the kelp stipe itself, and they stick there incredibly hard. I'm trying to work out with my science team how these octopus are actually getting these limpets off the kelp and bringing them back to their dens. And we thought it was a simple thing of they're just drilling and putting their poison into the mollusk, but it turns out that it's actually much more complex, and they've got various ways of doing this. So it was a fantastic week for furthering that research.
Yeah, well, one of the things you certainly have brought us is a view into the complexity of what's in the ocean and in what you call the Great African Sea Forest. Just in case someone hasn't seen your film or even had a chance to look at the book yet, please describe the life around the Great African Sea Forest and how big is the kelp? And of course, this area is famous for sharks, big and little, right?
Yes, I mean, I had the privilege also 2 days ago to be diving right near the very point of Africa, and we came across 50 spotted gully sharks. They're about 2 meters in size, and 50 of them were just moving in this incredible these circles crisscrossing each other, and a giant shoal of fish was just above them. So it was this almost a sense of, I felt I was in pre-colonial times for a second, and underneath this incredible shiver of sharks and this thousands of fish were sea hares mating, maybe 100 sea hares mating. So it was quite something very special to see. And I tried to go for a second dive later in the day, and of course there was nothing. They were all gone. So it was this incredible moment. But to answer your question, the Great African Sea Forest stretches from right up Namibia all along the west coast of South Africa, and then turns around the point and goes a few hundred kilometers up the east coast. So it's about 1,400 kilometers in length. And the actual kelp itself grows to up to 15 meters or 45 feet in length. So it feels like you're in a giant swaying underwater forest, especially if the water is clear. It's one of the greatest sights on Earth. And the top is they're heavy leaves that come off the blade. So you get shafts of light coming through the holes in the leaves, and it's this kind of magical dance of light. The enormous number of animals in the kelp, living on the kelp itself, on the holdfasts, in the leaves, and then a great biodiversity of animals living, around the forest itself.
So you get into this forest by doing something that I think most of us would think is torture. The water is not exactly warm there, even in December. I suspect it's probably not above, 60 degrees Fahrenheit? Maybe it's not even 50 degrees Fahrenheit yet. But you swim without a wetsuit. Why do you do this? And you do offer an explanation in your book, so I want you to tell me about your ideas regarding brown fat.
Okay, great. Thanks, Steve. So, I grew up very close to the ocean, so close that the waves used to, break parts of our house down. So I grew up diving from 3 years old, and we never had wetsuits in those days. So I had, my first 10 years of life doing that, and I always in the back of my mind knew that this cold was something special, and whenever I had a difficult time, I used to go back into that cold water. And then about 10 years ago, I just decided I'm going to try and dive every day for a decade. And I didn't want to wear the wetsuit because I wanted to try and adapt my body to the cold and see how that affected me. And what it does is it gives you this incredible lift. There's a big shift in brain chemistry, an enormous amount of dopamine introduced to the brain. The cortisol levels drop radically. So you feel much calmer, and you feel uplifted. So it's this wonderful feeling, and also your mind somehow works better. So I do a lot of underwater tracking, and you need to have your mind really engaged. So the cold, ironically, actually helps with that tracking. And you ask about the brown fat. So every baby that's born is born ready for the wild environment. We are wild-born creatures. So it's born with a brown fat, which are little pockets that act as thermoregulation devices. They heat the body when it's cold. And if we don't expose ourselves to cold, what happens is this brown fat kind of withers and doesn't become useful. But if you expose yourself over and over again to cold, the brown fat builds up. And sometimes, if you're really feeling good and healthy, because a lot of other parameters have to be in place, you can be in this cold water here and really starting to get quite cold, and then suddenly you just feel this heat being released by the body. It's an incredible feeling. It's almost ecstatic. And you can feel yourself warming up in that cold, and you can keep going. So it's an amazing device that's part of our evolutionary makeup, that's there to keep us cold. It's almost like having an inbuilt cloak, a warm coat, but inside your body that just turns on and keeps you comfortable.
I gather, though, that this doesn't happen exactly the first time you go in cold water. How long did it take you to develop your brown fat and this remarkable reaction to the cold?
So what I could feel was after about a year of going every day, quite a big difference. The stopping shivering after each dive, and then it just seems to increase over the next sort of 2 or 3 years gradually. And then, of course, another big factor with the cold is it seems to improve your immune system dramatically. I used to get, ill with flus and colds and things pretty regularly. And I can't remember when I last had a flu or cold or anything like that. So it really does make a massive difference to the immune system.
Well, certainly it's very convenient right now in this time of COVID and the stresses that we see around the world, including South Africa, to have that ability. We have a video question now from a student at the Boston Community Leadership Academy. It's called the McCormick School. It's for grades 7 to 12, and just down the street from our studios at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So let me ask my producer, Jenny Doring, if she could roll that tape for us.
Hi, my name is Gio, and I'm from the BCLA McCormick. My question is, what is the most amazing thing that you learned while exploring the kelp forest?
Lovely question, thank you. Should I just go straight ahead and answer, Steve?
Please do, yes.
Great. I learned a great deal from my octopus teacher. I learned so much about her behavior and what her species behavior. I learned, I was able to find new species thanks to her, actually living in her den, an incredible form of mysid that shoals inside the octopus dens. So a lot of incredible behavior. So I have many animal teachers, not only the octopus, specialized fish that surf out of the water, 2 meters out of the water to get their prey, the limpets, and twist them off the rocks. So an extraordinary teaching in animal behavior that can, straight from those animals. But I guess the most powerful thing that I think I learned was that all the animals in the kelp forest, and in fact all the animals and plants in the ocean and on this planet, make up what we call biodiversity. And this biodiversity has tremendous intelligence, and it is the immune system of our planet. And I realized, and I felt in my heart how this natural system has kept us alive for 300,000 years. That's how long we've been on this planet as a species. It's kept us alive since the very beginning of time. It kept our great-great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers alive. And over time, it's just kept us alive, and it's still keeping us alive today. Every single breath we take, every mouthful of food, it's all thanks to this great natural system. And it's so important to remember that and do everything we can to help the system and to regenerate her, because she's our mother. She is our mother of every single human that's ever been on this planet, from the year dot. So she's our big mother, and we really need to take care of her.
So, of course, we're having this discussion with you, Craig, because of your documentary, My Octopus Teachers. And one of the most remarkable moments in that film is when she actually extends her arm, a tentacle, and touches your hand. Why do you suppose a wild animal would make contact with a human in this way?
Yeah, it's really strange. It's not easy to answer that many ways, it's totally mysterious. A lot of not a lot, but quite a few animals will sometimes decide to reach out and make contact with a human. In the case of octopus or cephalopods, they have a natural curiosity. So their whole lives are balanced between this fear and curiosity. And they're almost like a cat. You know how curious cats are. They just can't help themselves. And when she's putting that one arm out like that, all her other arms are attached very strongly to the den. So she wants to know, she wants to feel, she wants to taste, because they can taste with the suckers as well. But she's being very careful. He's putting the one arm out, and she just can't help herself. What is this strange creature here? What does this thing smell like, taste like? And it's curiosity. It's sheer curiosity.
Craig, here in Boston at the New England Aquarium, I also got to meet an octopus, courtesy of naturalist Cy Montgomery, named Octavia, I think, and she was in a tank, not in the open ocean. And she also extended one of her arms to hug my right arm, and I felt so connected to her. And then I was heartbroken when I learned that she would only live a year. Why such a short life, do you think?
Yes, I had the privilege of speaking to Cy not very long ago, and of course read her wonderful book. It's quite interesting. You think, these octopus only live for such a short time. I think there was a giant Pacific octopus, am I right, Octavia? So I think they live for up to 4 or 5 years, but the smaller octopus, like my Octopus Teacher, only live for a year and a half. And you think, oh my goodness, this is, they're dying and they're so clever, this can't be good. But it's actually an incredible strategy, especially in the difficult world we're facing now with the environmental crisis, because animals like cephalopods that can breed very fast, they live fast and die young kind of thing, are actually much more resilient than animals, say, like sharks, like the pajama shark, for instance. Grows very slowly. They get up to 35 years old. They mature late, and they're much more vulnerable than cephalopods. So it's actually a very good strategy for survival, and they're one of the animals that do relatively well, even under all the pressures we're throwing at them.
So, and in your book, by the way, you introduce us to another cephalopod in the kelp forest there, the cuttlefish. And you were lucky enough to witness an incredible display of how cuttlefish have mastered the art of mimicry. This is something you describe on page 159 of your book, but I suspect you can tell us about it from memory.
Yeah, I never can forget. That's the wonderful thing about learning directly from these animals, Steve. It's so powerful, and you get impacted so heavily that you can never forget a lot of the detail. And I remember very clearly the first day that I saw a tuberculate cuttlefish. This is a small species of cuttlefish that only occurs in South Africa. And they are such masters of camouflage that when I looked at this creature, I had no idea what it was. I thought maybe it's a strange piece of algae, or what the hell's going on here, and was mimicking the algae. And this animal then changed into a cuttlefish and jetted off and left a puff of ink in front of my face, and I was just like open-mouthed, gobsmacked. And this animal is even better at camouflage than an octopus, if you can imagine that. It's very small, very vulnerable, soft-bodied. So it's got this incredible way of pretending to be a hard-shelled whelk. It changes its whole body shape, and it points its arms, and it changes its color, and even tiny details of these little polychaete worms that grow on the backs of the whelk shells. It even mimics those. So it fools predators into thinking it's a hard shell. It even then sometimes pretends to be a hermit crab living in that hard shell, and drags itself along slowly where it can actually swim, relatively fast. And then if it has to swim, it can actually mimic a fish, a fish called a clipfish that lives in this environment. So this animal is truly the master of mimicry and camouflage. It's quite incredible.
One of the most enticing aspects of your book is the sense that there's much more that's going on in the kelp forest and indeed in nature than just simply one creature finding its prey, that it's just sort of a rough and tumble and difficult and challenging world. You found a lot of cooperation and understanding and affiliation under the seas there, much of which hasn't been documented before. Talk to us a bit about that.
Oh, lovely question. Thanks, Stephen. You obviously read the book in quite detail. I appreciate it. What I found was there were such unusual alliances, and one of the most interesting alliances was between the tuberculate cuttlefish that we've just spoken about and one of my favorite fish, which is called the giant clingfish or rocksucker. And what was incredible is that when these fish are adult, they could so easily predate or eat the small cuttlefish. I mean, it's absolutely a perfect snack for them. And the other way around as well. An adult cuttlefish would, quite easily eat the small, the young fish. And in fact, they do eat a lot of fish in the environment. But for some reason, which I think I may have worked out, they have formed this ancient alliance where they completely leave each other alone and don't predate each other's babies. And you'll see them sitting, right together like this, like friends, in these little caves. It's quite remarkable, but it's clever because they both benefit tremendously from this alliance. And it's been forged over an enormous period of time in this environment. So, and I think, this whole idea of, nature being a kind of environment where it's just, everything's killing everything else. Certainly, there are a lot of predators, for instance, in the kelp forest. And I see a lot of predations and kills going on every day. But one thing I've also learned is, like, if you look at the bigger picture, that the whole biodiversity is in this incredible balance. So, for instance, the pajama shark is predating the octopus, but it also keeps those octopus numbers in balance, because if it didn't do that, those octopuses would overwhelm a lot of the mollusks, and you'd have a shortage of food, and everyone would suffer, including the octopus. So it's incredible how the biodiversity and this whole living system and this natural intelligence is kind of looking after itself, and in this wonderful way, and looking after us as well. So at first it might seem quite vicious, even cruel, but it's actually, on a bigger scale, it's exactly the opposite. It's this kind of predation and this power of these interactions that keep things going and keep them alive.
I found it as a reminder of my responsibility as a human to not just simply be extracting from nature, but to do my role, to help the other creatures as they help me. And but speaking of predators, there's a remarkable sequence in your book about your co-author and how he runs into, or maybe doesn't quite run into, a great white shark. Where you are in South Africa, in this place known as False Bay, near Cape Town. I guess it's called False Bay because explorers years ago thought that they would find a harbor in there, and there is not one. So you have to keep going around Cape Point. But False Bay is famous for a lot of great white sharks, and your co-author had this experience. Perhaps you could recall for us now.
Yeah, sure. It actually just occurred just off here from where I'm sitting now, only a few hundred meters from where I'm sitting. And we were swimming out, maybe 300 or 400 meters out, and we were with a friend, and Ross, who's my friend and co-author, we were a bit ahead, and suddenly we turned round because our friend was shouting, and he'd just seen a huge great white swim past, and you could see the fear and sort of shock in his eyes, and it was sort of circling around towards us. And I mean, it is, if you are not used to sharks, they've been through Jaws and all the, media and so on, have been blown up into these like, terrifying creatures that are just after humans and will kill you. And it's really quite the opposite. I've been fortunate enough to spend 2 years diving with sharks, making a film about great whites and tiger sharks and other sharks. So I was quite used to being with sharks, and I knew that, first of all, they didn't see humans as food. We don't come up on their radar as food. And it's actually quite hard to get close to them. So I was excited that he'd seen this shark, and I wanted to stay and wait for this wonderful encounter. It's a real privilege, and it's pretty difficult to see a great white in the wild. They're not very common, and they stay away from humans generally. So the others were a bit horrified that I wanted to wait, but we were in a safe position. We had a big rock behind us. And we were in on a shallowish shelf. And one of the things is that you don't want that great white coming underneath you and doing a vertical approach on you in murky water. So we were there's all these protocols when working with these big sharks. So we were actually in a very safe place. And we waited, but unfortunately that animal, like mostly happens, it wasn't too interested, even perhaps a little bit afraid of these strange creatures, and it moved away. But it was a little bit frightening for the others who weren't, hadn't had the privilege of knowing these animals. And Ross has subsequently, got to know sharks much better, and now would, not be afraid in a circumstance like that.
Yeah, I mean, how close did the great white come to Ross?
I think it came within 3 or 4 meters. Swam past, and just cruising along, no aggression whatsoever. But I mean, you see an animal like that it's a large animal that can weigh up to, over a ton. So it's a large intimidating shark.
So as we've been talking, Craig, you co-authored this book with your friend and now diving partner and colleague Ross Frylinck. What's it like to see this special place, the great African sea forest, reflected in someone else's eyes?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think what's great about seeing it through other people's eyes, when you're quite used to it and you've been diving for quite a few years, and then you go with someone when it's a bit fresh and new to them, and you come out and you see the awe and the shock and the excitement in someone's face, and hear it in their voice, and it's almost like you've realized you've taken them almost to another planet. I mean, it's a gravity-free underwater forest with these huge shafts of light and these strange and very exotic creatures that nobody's ever heard of. It has a massive impact, and that's the wonderful thing about taking someone fresh, is you get to relive that, and you realize, oh my God, this place is just, it's so remarkable and so beautiful. So it's a lovely thing to do that. And then we've taken so many people, and kind of it's life changing. You suddenly For me, I've got an underwater home. It's a real home. It's a real place. It's probably my favorite place on earth. Um, and to have that is adds an enormous dimension to one's life, and to know all those creatures, not all of them, but quite a few of them very intimately, and to develop these, deep love bonds with these creatures. And the more, of course, you know about their behavior, the closer you feel to them. It has a profound effect on the inside of one's being as well.
Of course, your close encounters weren't all with creatures with fins and gills and the ability to stay endlessly underwater. You had truly remarkable experience with an otter while swimming one day. Perhaps you could tell us about that now.
Yeah, these animals are really special. It's a Cape clawless otter. So they live on land in holts and little holes in the rocks and under grasses and things. And then they hunt in the kelp forest every day. But they're extremely shy. I mean, people can be living here for quite a few years and, never having seen one. I mean, you've visited many times here, I know, Steve. Have you seen one of these otters?
I certainly haven't. No, and I've even walked among those rocks where you have pictures of of where they go, and I've never noticed one.
Yeah, so it's not an animal that you see often, and you might normally see it from a distance. So I was diving very early in the morning. I think it was winter, pretty freezing cold, and I was like, what am I doing so early here? What's going on? And then I just, out of the corner of my eye, I saw this big creature that I think the third biggest otter in the world. It's like a medium-sized dog, like bouncing off the bottom of the ocean. They go down and they bounce off, and all the tiny bubbles come out their fur. And I was, wow, this is, so lucky just to get a glimpse of this Cape clawless otter underwater in the kelp forest. It was so exciting. And I just kept my body very, very still. Didn't move a muscle. And then I was amazed to see this otter, curious, like you said, what's going on here? Now coming in closer to me, and I could sense it was a bit afraid, but also very curious. And then it approached, but it approached from behind. So it's thinking, okay, I mustn't get anywhere near this strange creature's mouth. I'm going to approach from behind and see what happens. I just kept dead still. And then I just felt its incredible little hands. They've got hands not unlike human hands, feeling my feet. And it was absolutely extraordinary. I was just on fire. I forgot about the cold, everything. It was just unbelievable. And then it slowly moved up my body, and then it came right in front of my face, and I stared into that wild face of that Cape clawless otter. And it put its little hands out and started touching my face, and it was just almost too much. I was overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And then it played with me in the water for maybe 10 minutes, and it was almost too much for me, the experience. It was so overwhelming. I got out and sat on a rock, and then the animal approached again. Very strange, mysterious encounter. And it's hard to know why they do this, but it perhaps could be that early humans were hunting cooperatively with these animals. And there's still a few places in the world, I believe in Bangladesh, where humans and otters hunt cooperatively. And maybe somehow, I mean, it's mysterious, this is a big maybe, this animal was kind of remembering some of this evolutionary past and wanted to engage again with this process. Or maybe it was just very curious and bold and wanted to see what I was, and realized, because it's a very intelligent animal, that I wasn't a threat.
As you pointed out, I've yet to meet the clawless otter there at near Cape Point, but otters are famous for being so playful. And what's also really interesting about your narrative here, your stories and pictures and everything, is how playful you find so many other sea creatures are. Tell us about how some some of the creatures in the kelp forest end up playing with each other and other species?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the norm. The play is something that we don't see that often in the wild. So, but when you do see it, it's quite special. And I have seen octopus playing with fish. Or at least I think it's playing. It's not the classic aggressive predation behavior. Octopuses have been observed scientifically playing in captivity, so it's quite possible that they are actually playing with the fish. One animal that is quite playful are seals, and seals will play, with us, or certainly it feels like play. But play, what's quite interesting about play is normally associated with animals of extreme intelligence, normally animals like primates or big cats. But to see an animal like a cephalopod, which is essentially a mollusk without a shell, playing, that's pretty incredible. And it shows you that invertebrate has tremendous intelligence. So yeah, I mean, it's as I say, it's not that common, but it's a very special thing when we see it.
There's another question related to that those cephalopods. Back to the octopus. Natalie Arias, who's in the 8th grade, asks, "How have you used what you've learned from the octopus and the experience in your personal life?"
Yeah, that's quite a difficult question in a way. I think that I think it's what it did. I mean, initially that comes to mind is when you start having relationships with wild animals, and a lot of wild animals, it takes a lot of pressure, strangely enough, off your human relationships. We rely very heavily on human relationships for our well-being, etc., etc. But as you start having the relationships with these wild animals and spending time with them, and I like sometimes spending time alone with them, you kind of feel that it's a wonderful feeling, the pressure off the human relationships. And that is a very positive thing, because you're not so needy anymore, but you just want that relationship with that human because you love them, you care for them, and it's not so much you need them. And I think it's something to do with, since if we go back in time, and I'm very fascinated with human origins, and I'm fascinated with living wild and how sophisticated early humans were. And I think that it's a natural state. We're used to and we're expecting to have relationships with multiple animals in our environment. So the psyche is expecting that, and when we don't have that, we put more weight on our human relationships, and that can sometimes be a bit difficult. So that's one of the things that I guess I've got a lot out of that, is that I have this relationship with these wild animals, and it's improved, I think, my human relationships. Not sure if I've answered that.
I think in fact, no, I think in fact you are recalling, because at one point in your book you call this wilderness rapture, that being immersed and being able to relate to the other creatures. I think if the biologist E.O. Wilson were with us right now, he might be talking about biophilia, the love that we have for other species. So what exactly, when you wrote about that, I believe that's what you're talking about now. And when have you felt most immersed in this state of this rapturous connection with the wild?
Yeah, I think I wish I had that feeling, a lot of the time, but it's very much, you get the glimpses of it, and certainly like an experience like I had with the otter, you feel that primal joy very powerfully after that, and it lasts for a few days. But then there are long periods sometimes where you don't feel necessarily that great, or you feel okay, and it's mostly certainly the animals themselves will trigger something like that, but sometimes a very extreme cold can do that, or a particular day where the water has a certain quality to it. It's impossible really to predict. But what I noticed, I did a lot of work for many, many years in different African countries, and I was very privileged to meet indigenous people who were very, very connected to nature. And I noticed that some of them who'd had early parts of their lives where they'd lived quite wild and very connected to animals, there was this quality to them that was joyous, and you'd be in their company, and I'd learned so much from these extraordinary men and women, and you'd be in their company and they'd suddenly just start laughing. But it wasn't because you'd said something funny or done something silly. It was just this internal rapture that had to come out in this laughter. And this has been documented by quite a few anthropologists, this same thing. And I think a large part of our human state, when we are close to the wild, is joyful. Not to say that hunting and gathering life is that easy. It's fierce, it's tough, difficult times, sometimes very harsh conditions, and extreme, but certainly also with this intense joy and grace. So I just got a glimpse of that really, in my time here. I don't think I was anywhere near to the kind of state that some of these indigenous people have managed to feel. So I just got glimpses of it, and it reminded me of this, and it was had a very strong effect on me.
I mean, to what extent is this a two-way phenomenon? Jay McKinney, who's in the 7th grade at the McCormick, asked, how do you think the octopus felt about you? How do you think that the wild feels about you when you're connecting to it?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's pretty much, it's impossible to easily know, even though I've spent so much time with these animals, what they're feeling. And an octopus has 2/3 of its cognition outside of its brain in its actual body and limbs. It's got a totally different cognition system to a human being. So, it's hard enough for us to know what maybe a primate or a mammal might be feeling, but to know what a cephalopod is feeling, an animal that's 200 million years old in terms of evolution. We're only 300,000 years old. It's impossible to say. I only know that you can see that if you're very calm and your heart rate is right down and your muscle tension is right down in the water, certain of the animals will be much calmer around you, especially sharks, because they can pick up muscle tension and heartbeat and all that kind of thing. But it's impossible to know what those animals are actually thinking or feeling.
So, to what extent does the ocean heal you? I mean, you and your co-author, Ross, mentioned in this volume that you've been recovering from emotionally traumatic experiences you've had. You talk about divorce. Ross mentions a sad, a difficult relationship with his father. So, how has the ocean healed you?
I think actually in a number of ways. I mean, it's as I say, the daily immersion. You can be in almost anybody can be in a not a very good mood or quite tired, lethargic, and I promise you, I'll take you into that water, and 20 minutes later, you're going to feel completely different. It almost works for everybody. And that's because there is actually a big brain chemistry shift and a physiological shift. And that can last for many hours of the day. And then, of course, you will understand, someone who's looked into this subject for many, many years, and having a relationship with wild animals changes one dramatically. You feel connected to your environment, you know their behaviors, you have a sense of place, you don't feel so separate a lot of the time. You don't feel separate, you feel like you are connected to an environment, and that psychologically is very empowering. And it also gives you purpose and meaning, because the more you know, the more interesting it is. I mean, I just can't wait to get back every day to see what's happening. I've got 20 or 30 mysteries I'm working on. Will I be able to get a little bit further with solving them? Taking photographs, I'm writing down the notes, I'm interacting with a whole group of incredible marine biologists who are fascinated with this world. It's an empowering way of living, and you kind of fall in love with wild nature. And I think this is something that humans have done for a very long time. So you feel kind of a little bit in the human design. You feel like you are doing maybe what you're designed to do, and that feels good. But it's not like this perfect elixir that you just go and do that and then everything's fine. Of course, there's a lot of things come along, life's difficulties, and struggled like everybody else with a lot of things. But it's also incredible to have the tool of the ocean. If I'm struggling, I force myself to go down there, and I force myself in that cold water, and I can normally get out of that difficult space, because it has this way of affecting one quite dramatically.
Craig, speaking of difficult spaces, places, as a species, we're in trouble. Just look at the ocean. I mean, between climate change, plastic pollution, changing the ocean chemistry to make it more acidic, we're making things difficult for ourselves and for the creatures that are there. How do you think getting closer to the oceans might help us reverse this decline in the way we humans are treating this environment that supports us? I mean, should we all just get in the water and take a look?
I think we should. I mean, it's also doesn't have to be the water. If you are far away from the water, your backyard, there are insects, or if you're even in a city, they're actually, in most cities, they're incredible animals. The biggest, I think, threat in many ways to our environment is this disconnection. If we don't know creatures and plants and fungi and algae and all these wonderful things, it's hard to care for them. It's hard to make decisions in life to regenerate or benefit nature. So the act of connection is an extraordinary act in empowering oneself and others to think about system change, to think about ways to regenerate this biodiversity, which is the very lifeblood of ourselves and our planet. So I think it's absolutely critical that we get to know her. We get to know, and it doesn't matter where you are, or what animals or plants or living forms you get to know. It's just making that connection again. Because when you've made the connection, you definitely start thinking and caring about that thing you start to love. I mean, it's just it's clear as day. So the threat in itself, the disconnection, or what I call the cooling of the human heart to nature, is in my mind the greatest threat. And if we can reconnect people in whatever ways, that is a fantastic step in, towards finding ways to regenerate her and to, we absolutely are in a crisis situation, and our species is seriously under threat. So, when you get close to the environment, it also becomes clear.
So, how have you been able to leverage your tremendous success in communicating with people? This movie that you did, my Octopus Teacher, this powerful book, which by itself is a volume of art pictures would be wonderful by itself. The prose and the comments in it would be wonderful. Taken together, it's extraordinary. How have you been able to leverage the public attention that you have to help accomplish this? What are you doing to help bring us closer now?
So, it's been incredible, Steve, in that a lot of extraordinary people from around the world have made contact and are providing resources to be able to work with many governments around the world to actually make a change, to create marine protected areas, to create system changes, to protect this environment. I was, lucky enough to be contacted by the incredible Jane Goodall, whose, life's just dedicated to this conservation work, just one of, and people like Jane, and we're putting our minds together and our hearts together, and it's happening. It really is happening. We have extraordinary opportunities now to make changes that will regenerate our living system. So I'm quite hopeful in that regard. It's hard to tell you, too much of the details because we're in that process at the moment. But I'm very uplifted and hopeful that we can. I'm just one of the cogs in this wheel, but somehow this film and this book has helped a lot to kickstart that process and develop this amazing team of people from around the world.
Well, it's very attractive. I mean, one might say that you're advocating a quiet reverence, like Jane Goodall, who sat and sat and sat until finally one of those primates was able to approach her, felt to make the connection the way that you made the connection with your octopus and otter. And so to what extent is the prescription for healing our planet one of patient waiting and expectation, waiting and seeing how nature approaches us as opposed to us trying to thrust our way out into nature?
That's a wonderful way, I think, to put it, Steve. And, I can hear it comes from you having thought a lot about this. Nature is so much more sophisticated than us. We think our technology is so sophisticated, but it's so slow and pathetic compared to the technology of nature. I mean, what she can do at ambient temperature, we couldn't even think about doing with our technology. It's quite extraordinary. So She has all the answers. She knows what to do. We are just, we new on this planet. We the new babies on the block. So, we need to really listen to her and watch her, because I think we can learn so much from her. So I love that. I love what you're saying, that idea.
Well, we are out of time now, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. Craig Foster is a co-founder of what he calls the Sea Change Project, and co-author of Underwater Wild, My Octopus Teacher's Extraordinary World. Thank you so much for joining us today, Craig. What a gift. And I want to thank everyone for joining us, and please be sure to sign up for the Living on Earth newsletter at loe.org so you're the first to know about our spring events. Again, here to close us out is New England Aquarium CEO and President Vicki Spruill.
Wow. Thank you, Steve, for so aptly guiding this just completely mesmerizing conversation and discussion. And thank you, Craig, for sharing this past hour with us and for sharing why it is so important to rekindle the wild in each of us by engaging with the natural world, regardless of where we are. And Craig, thank you for so eloquently and gently sharing your underwater home and its rapture. And personally, thank you for warming this human heart towards nature. This event was made possible with generous support from the Lowell Institute, and many thanks to our fellow presentation partners, Living on Earth's Book Club and the UMass Boston School for the Environment. If you enjoyed this program and want to help support the New England Aquarium's ocean education and conservation work, please consider giving to our Mission Forward Fund at neaq.org. And please also consider supporting Living on Earth. The first 20 folks, as Steve mentioned in his introduction, who donate $75 or more to Living on Earth this week will receive a special thank you, a copy of Craig's beautiful book, Underwater Wild, My Octopus Teacher's Extraordinary World. It's a $50 value, and thanks to the publisher Mariner Books, your entire donation of $75 or more will support Living on Earth. So go to loe.org, click on Donate at the top of the page. Thank you all for a wonderful time together, and goodbye.
Good night.
Thanks so much, Vicki. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks so much, Craig and Vicki.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
long.
Thank you. Made my day.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.